This, as you know, is part of a series we've been running while we haven't all been able to gather together around the world. And I'm delighted by how many people have picked up on it, both live and in recorded form. So it's tremendous. And we love your feedback. We love ideas. We love follow-up. And we've got time for Q&A after it. I think it's almost impossible to start anything at the moment without putting it in the backdrop of Ukraine. These are clearly appalling, horrifying, and just world-changing events that we're seeing going on at the moment. We don't know what the implications are. It puts question marks over an enormous amount of things in a world that was already full of question marks. But it is likely to be something that will genuinely shape the future of the world, and certainly over the short, middle, and possibly long term. So I think, we've got to say our heartfelt sadness for everybody involved. There are no winners in this one, it looks like, and it looks like a terrible, terrible humanitarian as well as political tragedy on every level. So I think, and that does have some important relevance to the whole issues of sustainability, which I'd like to come to in a while. But the other point I think it's important when addressing our question today, is we've come off the back of COP. And we've been sitting with COP last year. There's a sense of tremendous momentum and progress in the world. And that has changed a huge amount. And I thought, so again, what we're talking about, we're talking it in post-COP. How does that work? Where does it really go? And so I think it's impossible to have today's question debated, really, without looking at it against those two big subjects as a backdrop. And I felt we could almost start with a whole sense of the financial services sector, we learned some time ago, was of systemic global importance. Yep. It really is at the heart of our whole systems, of our social, economic, and political systems even. And when it's come to climate change, one of the most important things I've felt we've seen is it really has committed to this, because it's one of the few sectors that can deliver systemic change. And so that has been, from where I sat, a sense of very exciting and important progress, and an enormous sense of momentum, particularly when running into COP last year. So I just thought I might quickly run down our panelists and see whether they had any of that sense of momentum really, not just running into COP, but coming out of it, and whether that is something that they can see both in the outside sector, but also in their own organizations maintaining. Bill, can I roll the ball to you first?
Yeah. First of all, I'll echo all of your tee-up comments, including the tragedy that we're witnessing in Ukraine right now. And it is and will be world-changing, I think, indefinitely. And no doubt also impacting on the climate front as well, although it's not clear exactly how. But maybe back to your question, I would note first that the momentum into Glasgow was just outstanding. And it was, for me, it was really, really encouraging to be in Glasgow, to see so many of my counterparts and private sector clients of ours who were not just jawboning and paying lip service, but were actually making concrete commitments. And I believe that those are genuine, and I don't think any of those have lost any of their effectiveness or intent. That said, the tremendous groundswell of public opinion behind the actions the business was taking, being driven by consumers and shareholders, other stakeholders, I think has been crowded out by the more tragic news of the day. And so I do worry that somehow we lose the momentum from here. I think we're coming into an interesting time now, and obviously the focus will remain on this war and the implications on all fronts, including what does a doubling in the price of oil mean, and other commodities for the way that businesses and consumers think about investing in renewables. The price of a solar panel is more or less the same as it was before. Wind turbine, the price of steel and aluminum have gone up a bit, but otherwise the economics are swinging in favor of renewables. But the pressure, I'm afraid, has dissipated. So I think it's the amongst all the other issues that we're all dealing with, finding a way to singularly focus again on how we're going to deliver on those commitments is absolutely critical. I think we can get there, but it's going to take some effort.
And funny enough, when we met at COP, you had a very important line, I thought, which was that this COP, it just shows the level of buying. And I think you used the expression, there's nowhere left to hide now. For big organizations particularly, they've got to decide where they stand on that. And the financial services sector really did get in that one, didn't they? I mean, that was we've never seen them do anything like that before.
I always find it fascinating. I've been in financial services my whole working life, and at one level, we don't really have much to do with the sustainability agenda at all because we don't actually emit a lot. Yeah. At another, we absolutely are a focal point because we have tremendous leverage over the people that do emit a lot, especially in emerging markets, where the government actions are not always as supportive or as cohesive as we can see in particular in Europe, and now increasingly in the UK. But we are, as much as the banking system became the front line in the fight against financial crime, applying sanctions and anti-money laundering, which I think we've become pretty good at, right? We've invested quite a bit in getting this right, and we're very effective. We were never the financial criminals, but we're the conduit. We will also be the conduit on the climate change side, and I think whether it's through the Glasgow Finance for Net Zero Alliance, these are really, really impactful organizations doing real work.
Yeah. I think that's got to be encouraging. And Jennifer, you, how do I say this, been at this game for a while in different shapes and forms and had this thing of gathering people together. Do you feel that cohesion is continuing post-COP? I mean, did you feel it going in, and is it continuing post-COP, or is it fading now?
So it's quite interesting because what His Royal Highness did about this time last year was to bring all the leaders of the Commonwealth together with our CEO community to really talk about, what are their needs, right, in terms of pursuing their green economy ambition, their transition ambitions. And that was a really important moment because he had to be in listening mode at that point in time. Yeah. And so we did 4 regional roundtables with the Caribbean, Pacific, Africa, and Asia. And that really gave us some insight that we then brought to the G7 leaders. So in terms of building moments. And then he again brought that message at the G20. And then immediately, obviously, we had COP. And I think the Prince's message to governments is that it's wonderful that we're coming together in a common narrative for transition, but governments alone don't have sufficient resources to deliver on those commitments. Yep. And they can't do it fast enough to meet the IPCC report challenges. Yeah. And so I think what we found is that there was a swell. I think there was a lot of collaboration between public and private sectors at COP, and then I think it just faded a little bit. And now we have to ramp up again. And of course now we are dealing with our Ukraine crisis, and what does that mean for our financial markets? And I think His Royal Highness is very much wanting to say we still need to lean in, as he did when the pandemic started. It could easily have been put off to the end of the agenda, but he kept with it. And I think that was his message this morning, is keep with it and keep going. And so we're looking to do the same type of thing. We have the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda in June. Immediately after that, we have the G7, G20 in Indonesia, and then COP27 in Egypt. And His Royal Highness went to Egypt immediately after COP to, again, deliver that message, to bring that continuity, because we have to keep leaning in if we're going to achieve the 2030 targets. And
I mean, from my perspective, watching it, it was very exciting being a COP, just sheer energy and drive in this. But and levels of commitment, but it was more corporate and consumer. It wasn't as much the government. You didn't feel that the governments walked away going, we did it. It was much more, as you say, the Global Financial Group, the GFANZ group. That's where I felt. So do you feel that, because where you sit, you cross over those two so clearly, do you feel the governments are now coming around to it, or do you think that is fading?
No, I think that it is actually increasing. They're starting to recognize the value and potential of the private sector and the financial sector. And what I think everyone speaks different languages, right? And so sometimes when we're dealing with developing economies, we say, okay, well, tell us, what's your plan? How can we help in terms of investment? And they're very much still thinking in the development paradigm, the grant-making paradigm, and it takes a lot of work to reorganize for an investment perspective. But economic growth potential is so huge if we can get that right, and that's what we're really focused on. But the willingness is there from the large economies like Germany is very, very excited about this, and very fully behind. So I think it's going to be an exciting year if we seize the opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's got to be right, and that's a very important word, the opportunity word. Peter, this wasn't a subject that one associated with Coutts some time ago, and we sit in your wonderful building here. It is something you've animated the business, but what drove that in the organisation? How much of that was the sector or the staff or the customers? What do you feel the driving forces when you lead an organisation? What makes that happen for you in a subject like that?
Alan, I've been here now just on 6 years, and around 5 years ago, we asked ourselves what should be our approach to ESG, environmental, social, governance, and the way we invest money on behalf of clients. So we researched our client base, and 3/4 of our clients wanted us to have ESG filters. So while we're this 330-year young private bank, actually we're modern and relevant and contemporary. So it was a bit of a surprise that fully 3/4 of clients wanted us to invest that way. So then we had a big choice, was should we start up a new set of green funds to sit alongside our old funds, or should all funds have ESG filters? And we took the decision that all funds would have ESG filters. So the only way that you can invest with us today is in funds that have ESG filters. Now that led us to saying, well, how are we going to quantify and make sure that we're improving as a business? And that led us to the B Corp journey. And so we started on a journey 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, to seek B Corp accreditation. Now, B Corps are companies that are required by their Articles of Association to take into account people, planet and profit, and take account of all stakeholders in every decision. So it's quite a big deal to make that step as a subsidiary of a listed business. But we took that step, and we're very pleased to be the first UK private bank to be B Corp accredited. Now, the challenge here is, yes, it's great for Coutts to be, we're really proud to be a B Corp, and you have to commit to an ongoing path of improvement. But the real leverage for us is the 20,000 entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs that we bank. And so we're encouraging as many of them to come on the B Corp journey alongside us. And so for people listening, if you go online and have a look at B Corp and see if your organisations might like to join that movement, it's a really important movement.
I think there was a sense, and there's quite a lot of people who said, all these commitments to COP, well, they're greenwashing it, they're really not playing. And I think that's why your words about it, nowhere to hide here. These are serious commitments from the top of organisations. And I think people forget what the pressure points for them are, Bill. It's not just, we've got a leader who would like to be nice about it. It is driven, isn't it, by a lot of the sources of funds, the customers, and yes, of course, absolutely the staff as well. But the driving forces they're not letting up, are they, in that way?
No, they're not. And I think that the whole idea of nowhere to hide really was around putting a set of systems in place that cover the various bases. You have to start, you can only reduce your emissions if you know where you're starting, and the data hasn't been so good. It's still not good in big parts of the world. Then you've got to have a plan for how quickly you can reduce, and that has to be tracked and reported and validated. But where does the pressure come from? We're sitting here we're working in the financial services industry. That's one point of pressure. I think that the more compelling point of pressure is probably from the buyers. So the buyers in the supply chain. For companies that are exporting, think about all those Chinese or Indian manufacturers who are exporting. They're not going to be able to sell to European or American or British companies if they're not green compliant themselves. So if finance is coming from one angle, supply chains coming from another angle, the consumers are coming from their own angle. And then, of course, there's their shareholders and other financiers and government. So there's a lot of pressure. And if any one of those pressure points turns out to be a bit weak, there's still many others, which doesn't give any of us a right to back off a bit, because we all have our own pressures. I can tell we feel very pressured by our employees, by our shareholders, and I think increasingly by our regulators. That's a good thing.
Yes, I agree. I always have a belief that also one of the pressures on big CEOs is not just their boardroom table, it's also their kitchen table. I mean, kids, the next generation of life come at you, and they're pretty uncompromising. We saw, Carl Icahn take McDonald's the other day. It was the pressure from his daughter. And the next gen pressure here is very, very strong, isn't it? And that, I don't feel that weakening. And also, if you want to be the best employer, I mean, most of us all in wars for talent. And you're not going to do it unless you really do look like you're being more of a part of a solution and part of the problem, because we're all part of the problem. The question is how much we're really committed to that.